eager to check the podcast out, meaning the one that we're doing right now. I believe I did what the guy above did. Basically, I taught the behaviors with leash and prong, sit, down, heel, recall. Then I layered the e-collar on top of the known behaviors. I paired leash, known, and low stim, unknown, together at first. Negative reinforcement and verbal command were applied at the same time. Then I started using just the low stim without the leash. Then an intermittent phase where the negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior, not before. Then finally, I escalated the intensity for non-compliance. Okay. It's just confusing. I understand like what they described with like the intermittent phase and stuff like that. I think gets into like Larry's book of how he conditions in the e-collar. But here's what I would argue with this, right? So first and foremost, did you actually teach the behaviors with leash and prong? And what I mean by that is when I say a behavior is taught, I mean that the dog will be compliant to the behavior on cue without the need of reinforcers or punishments.
Yeah.
Right? They understand how to respond to a cue. They clearly know what that means.
Yeah.
Right? What a lot of people, I think, mean when they say I taught it with leash and prong first is that they shaped the behavior. They checked the box that they can get the dog into the position, but they never attached it to any sort of cue.
Yep.
Right? So they are technically still in the beginning stages of negative reinforcement. They haven't achieved the negative reinforcement of the dog learning how to escape or avoid the sensation.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
So I would argue first and foremost that it wasn't taught. So basically what you're saying then, if again, this person can correct me if I'm wrong, right? If it actually wasn't taught, then we're trying to teach a behavior. So we need to follow the rules of negative reinforcement with that, right? Josh, what are the rules of negative reinforcement? Are you listening to me?
Yes.
What are they?
Oh my God. Negative reinforcement?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to get it wrong. The negative reinforcement is when you're... Wait, is that the one where... Okay.
Negative reinforcement is for teaching.
Yeah, for teaching and not stopping a behavior. It's for teaching a learned...
So reinforcement. You're increasing the likelihood of that a dog is doing something.
Yeah. So what gets me...
The negative, positive?
Yeah, because it sounds
Everybody
like...
gets confused by that.
Yeah, because it sounds like it would be the opposite.
It just means adding or subtracting. You're adding something or subtracting something to increase or decrease something.
Yeah. Yeah, every time I get like caught up...
Everybody gets thrown off.
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Many
everybody.
trainers do as well. So
Okay.
it's not just you. Okay, so negative reinforcement. We're teaching something. What are the rules?
What do you mean?
What are the rules? I just talked about it.
What? We just said it.
I just said what?
What? Okay.
Josh.
The of negative reinforcement?
Yeah. How do you use negative reinforcement?
So, like, if you put them on a bet, they escape the pressure.
Yes. What's another rule for it? That they have to want to escape the pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Okay.
So
that's
all right. So here are the rules. So I got to slow myself down because I got to make sure you're learning this along.
Yeah, I'm really trying.
Okay. So the rules of negative reinforcement are that you have to be able to physically get the dog into position, right?
Yeah.
That way you could quickly show them how to turn off the pressure,
Yeah.
right? That the sensation is motivating enough for them to want to escape it. They need to want to achieve the relief of the pressure not being there anymore. Because the relief, the off of the pressure is where it's like, oh, fine, I got it. It's good. I want more of that, right?
Yeah.
I want to escape this sensation, right? It creates a positive association with what they were doing when they felt the relief of pressure, right?
Gotcha.
And then two, I have to be able to control exactly where the pressure turns off. Right?
Okay.
So it can't be random.
Yeah.
It has to turn off in the exact same spot every time. It has to be motivating enough for them to want to escape it.
Yeah.
And I have to be able to show them how to escape it.
Yeah. They want to crave that feeling of relief. Okay.
So getting back to this. So they said they taught the behavior first. I'm going to go into this assuming they didn't teach it. They just shaped it.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Then they said they layered the e-collar on top of known behaviors. They paired leash and low stim together at first. So at this stage, they're not even giving commands, right? They're not even giving commands. They're just pressure off, pressure off, pressure off. They're pairing those two together, right? But you already know you can get the dog into position. So just use the negative reinforcement to actually train the command, right? Because our rules of putting a cue on things are we have to make sure we can make it happen.
Yeah.
You already know you can make it happen with the leash.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
Because they've already shown that.
So let's start adding the cue in. Let's progress as opposed to have these stages that are unnecessary.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just use it. Let's just teach the command then at that point.
Yeah.
Right? So they paired leash and low stim together at first. Negative reinforcement and verbal command were applied at the same time. So that's another stage that they're adding to things, which is now we're saying sit, sit,
Yeah.
sit,
Okay.
sit, right? So we went from, we already did that with no command to now we're doing it with the command. But what are the rules of classical conditioning? When we're teaching a cue, we have to use classical conditioning, is that the cue has to come before the behavior, right? The cue has to come first, then we need to make it happen. Because when we're putting a cue on things, we have to ensure that the dog has an opportunity to start responding to the cue. So by doing them at the same time, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to see when the dog starts responding to the cue.
Yeah. He never has a chance to respond.
You'll never see it. So how do you know when to move on to the next stage?
You don't.
Right? That's like me saying, let's say I'm just using leash, right?
Yeah.
Negative reinforcement with the leash. And I say, sit, 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 sit.
Yeah.
Right? When do I know when the dog is responding to sit and not the leash?
You don't.
You don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So cue has to come first. So here's our thing. You already know you can get the dog into position with leash and prong.
Yeah.
Then you do this unnecessary layering of the e-collar and the prong together. Right? Then you do this unnecessary and technically incorrect classical conditioning process of giving your cue with the stimulation. Right? At the same time. Then you move to the intermittent stage where negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior. That should be the stage you just go right to. And forget intermittent stage. That is just teaching a command, right?
Okay.
We're teaching the cue right now.
Yeah.
So we give the command. If the dog doesn't respond to it, we use negative reinforcement in order to get the dog into it, which increases the likelihood that in the future they're going to respond to the cue because something positive happens when they sit after they're given the cue.
Yeah, it's released.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The pressure's released.
So then, and then it said, of course, food and toys were present too at every step. Forget that.
Yeah.
Right? We're using negative reinforcement. We're talking about negative reinforcement, not positive reinforcement right now. Right?
So
quit mixing everything up. And this is a longtime listener of ours. I promise I'm not like digging on you right now. this helps me articulate my point really well. And I'm kind of getting a little bit passionate about it. Right?
I like it.
So, because I think this just creates so much fucking confusion.
Yeah.
So much confusion.
I'm confused.
Right? So then they said, of course, food and toys are present. And then it said, also, wait, hold on. Present. Oh, yeah. So then an intermittent phase where the negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior, not before. Then finally, I escalated the intensity for non-compliance. So all that work, so that should be sandwiched with the step before, right?
Yeah.
It's not you're using negative reinforcement. So if what you're saying is you did an intermittent phase where negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior, if that stimulation in itself was not motivating enough for them to want to avoid for non-compliance, right? You weren't using negative reinforcement, right? You just had the e-collar just there. Right? Yeah. And the dog didn't actually learn anything until that last step, right? So let's look at doing this again, how I would fix all of this, right? Teaching behavior with leash and prong, meaning shape behavior with leash and prong. Necessary step, do it, hell yeah.
Okay.
Right? Next, you would move right to your intermittent stage, right? So, which is intermittent phase where negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior, not before, right? So you're using your negative reinforcement in order to teach the behavior, but while you're doing it, you're making sure that the motivation on the e-collar is always at an intensity that the dog is motivated enough in order to want to avoid. It's not just like, this is where we get into, I've talked before on the podcast about like low, high, like low levels, high levels, low levels, high levels. Fuck low levels and high levels, right? Fuck increasing intensity for non-compliance. The intensity should always be at a level that the dog is motivated enough by to want to escape or avoid. And that doesn't mean low or high, because low and high are subjective,
to
right?
the dog,
to the fucking dog,
Yeah.
right? That level may have been at a subjectively low level that the dog was motivated enough by to want to avoid, but it also may have objectively been at or it may have, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It may have been at a level that is perceived by us as humans to be really high that they were motivated enough by.
Yeah.
But it should always be at an intensity that they want to avoid. Because the problem with how this is phrased is then finally I escalated the intensity for non-compliance, right? Mm-hmm. That is looking at things from the light of, I only use an aversive that the dog is averse by if they're being non-compliant.
Yeah.
Which is not the case. No. We use aversives to teach things. And if you're not using it aversively to teach something, you're not using negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
You're not.
No.
Right? But here's the other fucking problem with this, right? The other problem with this is you actually are, let's forget the food and toys for a second. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're doing the intermittent phase where the negative reinforcement stim was present only if the dog didn't commit to the behavior, but it wasn't at a level that the dog was motivated by. Well, something was at a level that the dog was motivated enough by, or else the dog wouldn't fucking do anything, right?
Yeah.
So what that means is you're just using your leash at a motivating level, right? And that the e-collar is fucking pointless, and you might as well take it and throw it away and just keep doing it with the leash at that point until you're ready to move on to the next stage.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just, everything that was described is unnecessary. It does nothing to get the dog to a place where they actually understand what the e-collar sensation is, but more specifically, how to avoid the e-collar sensation and the motivation to want to avoid the e-collar sensation.
Yeah.